This is Total Retail Tech Insights.
The content retail executives need to optimize their use of technology throughout their organizations.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Tech Insights. I'm Joe Keenan, the editor-in-chief of Total Retail. I'm pleased to be joined on today's show by Traci Bower, who is the Senior Vice President of Revenue at Sezzle. In her role at Sezzle, Traci is helping retailers drive growth by reaching younger consumers across the credit spectrum through its buy now, pay later solutions. We're going to talk to Traci about the emergence of buy now, pay later, Sezzle's kind of role in that whole ecosystem, how it's working with its retail partners, a little bit about Sezzle's 10-year anniversary, and some of the exciting things to come from the business going forward. So, Traci, I'm excited to have you on the show and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here and appreciate you having me.
So to get us started, I'd like to learn about the guests that we have on the podcast. So your career path, as am I doing my research before this interview, is kind of an interesting one. Tell me a little bit about your kind of background and how you ended up becoming Senior Vice President of Revenue at Sezzle and kind of what drew you to the Sezzle organization in the first place.
Yeah, so I do have a pretty unique path. Most people see becoming an SVP as climbing a ladder. My path looked a little more like jumping off one first because before Sezzle, I was an entrepreneur in a totally different industry. I had built a service-based business from the ground up. I grew it, ran it for nearly a decade, sold it, and then found myself really at a crossroads, just kind of asking myself, what's next? And I wanted something completely different. And I knew I wanted another early stage company because I love that grind, wearing multiple hats, solving problems with scrappiness and instinct, and kind of just never knowing what the day was going to throw at me. That's the kind of energy that really fuels me personally. So I started looking for jobs at early stage companies, and I found Sezzle on a job site that was specifically for startups. And at the time, they were tiny. I think I was somewhere around the 20th hire. The opportunity presented itself, and the overall concept of Sezzle, it really clicked for me, and I knew that personally. Quick story, right out of college, I was asked to be in my best friend's wedding, and the bridesmaid's dress, I remember, was just way outside of my budget at the time. So obviously skipping the wedding wasn't an option, but I remember trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. And I guess that's really why and where the concept of Sezzle and buy now, pay later immediately clicked for me. I lived that exact problem, and I understood the value of having just a little flexibility when life happens. So I made a decision that probably looked strange from the outside, but for me, it was pretty simple. I just kind of checked my ego at the door and decided to start over. And I applied for an entry-level sales development role. And if you're familiar with what a typical SDR role looks like, it's usually an early career job, fresh out of college. I was none of those things. But because we were so small, I was really fortunate enough to be able to interview directly with the founder. So at the time, we didn't have formal HR, we didn't have a ton of layers. And I really just basically looked at them and said, I'm going to be honest, I've never done this before. I don't know payments, but I built and ran a pretty successful business for over a decade, and I'll outwork anyone. So give me a shot. And they did. And from there, I just kept learning and evolving. I was direct selling as an account executive, then a sales director. I then led our client services team. From there, I moved up to VP of our SMB mid-market segment. And then for the last years, I've been SVP of revenue. And right now I oversee sales, partnerships, client services, and RevOps. And honestly, the thing that hasn't changed from my day one to today is I'm a person who figures things out kind of as they go. I bet on myself. And fortunately, Sezzle has just given me a really amazing runway to do it.
Yeah, it's been a good match given your entrepreneurial background and how it's fit into kind of that entrepreneurial spirit that exists at Sezzle. So buy now, pay later, BNPL, we'll probably use that acronym multiple times here during our conversation.
Yes.
It's become increasingly mainstream, yet I believe there are still kind of these misconceptions that still persist amongst consumers about BNPL. So tell me, in your eyes, what are some of the biggest misunderstandings today that you feel are out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny that you asked this because I just experienced something recently that's really fitting for this question in our conversation. I was sitting at the hair salon a few weeks ago, and I overheard a group of young women say, I just don't understand BNPL. If you don't have the money, then you shouldn't buy it. And first of all, I had to kind of bite my tongue to keep from interjecting myself into their discussion, reminding myself that they don't want to hear my sermon on payments at the hair salon. But it did hit me that there is still a big misconception really about the entire industry, and the assumption that if someone chooses to pay over time, it automatically means that they can't afford the purchase, when in reality, people make payment decisions every day across a variety of payment options. And those are based on convenience, budgeting, cash flow, rewards, personal preference. So I've always found it really interesting that BNPL is still viewed through a bit of a different lens. And this isn't one product being good over another product being bad. Different financial products solve different problems. And what's unique about Sezzle is that our core product charges no interest, and our success really depends on customers, one, using it responsibly, but two, repaying us successfully. So that creates a strong alignment around helping people manage their budgets and cash flow. And for many consumers, it's simply another tool in the financial toolbox. And for certain purchases, it can be a really effective one. Part B to that, another misunderstanding I want to touch on, you hear people say, buy now, pay later, and immediately they picture a certain type of consumer. But the reality is much more nuanced than that. In fact, one of the biggest surprises for most people is that the stereotypical BNPL user is they don't exist. Morgan Stanley did a study, and highly engaged users, they are six-figure earners who could pay up front, but they choose not to because BNPL is not a crisis tool. It's genuinely just a shift in how people manage their money. So the assumption that it's a product for people living beyond their means, it just doesn't hold up. And, a word I kind of want to come back to and focus on here is manage. So cash flow management is one of the most powerful and I think underappreciated use cases for BNPL. And you think about someone who needs new tires but doesn't want to wipe out their savings. Or honestly, think about me right outside of college and needing that bridesmaid dress that would have stretched my budget really thin that month. Splitting that payment into multiple payments, it isn't irresponsible. It's just it's real life. And there's one more angle to this story too that I want to touch on. There's a significant population of people who simply just don't have access to traditional credit at all. Young people just starting out, immigrants building a new life, people who've gone through financial hardship and are rebuilding. The Federal Reserve estimates about 32 million American adults are effectively unscorable. So no credit history or just too thin of a file to really to generate a traditional score. And Sezzle is really powerful there, that it gives those people access to purchasing power in a really structured and responsible way.
Yeah, I love the idea of thinking about it not as that, people are they're buying above their means. It's that they're using it as a smart budgeting tool, and Sezzle in particular, without that interest for those high ticket purchases, it makes a lot of sense, right? So it's a useful tool, which leads us to kind of the retailer part of the equation now. BNPL space has become crowded, right? There's a lot
Right.
of providers out there. So for merchants that are thinking about implementing a BNPL solution into their business, what should they be considering from your perspective? And maybe a second part of that is that even if they already have one or two providers, maybe if they're evaluating adding another BNPL option at checkout, what should they be thinking about? What are some of those bullet points that should be answered before they launch a new BNPL solution?
Yeah, well, imagine if a retailer said, we accept Visa, so we don't need MasterCard or anything else. It sounds ridiculous, right? Yet retailers say the BNPL equivalent all the time. We already have a provider, we're covered. And every time I hear that, I think to myself, you're leaving way more than just money on the table and you don't even know it. So most retailers understand that different cards serve different customers, and BNPL works the exact same way. I think merchants start with the wrong question, and instead of asking which BNPL provider should I use, what they should be asking is who am I trying to reach? Because different providers bring different audiences, different approval models, and really just different ways of engaging customers. And the second question to ask is, what do you want BNPL to do for your business? If you want to convert customers that are already in your funnel, your existing provider most likely probably handles that. But if you want to acquire new customers that you've never touched before and people who are loyal to a specific BNPL, who discover merchants through that specific provider's app, who shop because of earning rewards or cash back. That's a completely different conversation. And that's where adding an additional provider stops being kind of a nice to have and starts being a part of the growth strategy. The third thing I'd look at is what happens after checkout. Do they actively market your brand to their users? Do they have an app that people are engaging with regularly? Do they run promotions that drive repeat purchases? Because that's where the differences really start to show up. Some providers are focused almost entirely on the transaction. Others are helping drive awareness, engagement, repeat business, and those are very different partnerships. So I feel like I'm starting to sound a little bit like Scott Galloway here with all the stats, but bear with me on one more. The RBC Capital Markets found that adding BNPL increases retail conversion rates by 20 to 30% and lifts average order values 30 to 50%. And our internal data mirrors those findings. So those kind of numbers are really hard to ignore.
Yeah, I think adding that color around the data is particularly useful. So thank you for sharing that with the audience. We noted it's a crowded space, the BNPL market. Let's talk Sezzle specifically and how you differentiate from some of those other providers, and particularly talk about kind of the customers that you're bringing to your merchant clients. I think that's a key differentiation point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, every declined transaction has a person behind it. So somebody found what they wanted, they filled their cart, they go to checkout, and then at the very last second, they get told no. So the question is, was that actually a bad customer, or was it a good customer that somebody else's model didn't quite understand? And based on our internal survey data, more than half of our shoppers say that they were declined by another buy now, pay later. And those are real people. They're real people with real purchasing intent and spending power who got turned away. And every time that happens, it's not just a lost sale, it's a lost customer relationship that may never come back. Our AI-powered underwriting model is built differently, and that means that we're approving people that other providers are walking away from. And that's not a small thing for a merchant's bottom line. New customer acquisition is what every merchant at the end of the day is chasing. And while underwriting will always be a part of our story, it's only one reason why merchants want to work with us. So the bigger story is really what Sezzle has become as a platform. And when people think of BNPL, they think of a button at checkout. But what we've built is something really fundamentally different. It's a full financial shopping lifestyle platform that people actually want to spend time in every single day. And just to give you a little bit better sense of what I mean, we have an earn tab where users come back every day to earn real money through cashback offers. We have receipt scanning where you can literally just earn points by scanning receipts from purchases, whether you use Sezzle or not. And it may sound simple, but it's a huge shift. It takes Sezzle from being something you use at checkout to something that you're engaging with every day. And to go a little bit further deeper into that, we have trivia, we have leaderboards, community rankings, we have an AI shopping assistant that turns Sezzle from a payment method into a shopping starting point. We have Sezzle Up, a product we're really proud of, and that's our voluntary credit building program. And that lets users report their Sezzle payment history to establish and rebuild credit. And so we've had customers tell us Sezzle Up has completely changed their financial trajectory. And when you hear stories like that, you really realize that you're no longer talking about just a payment product. You're talking about something that's creating real value in people's everyday lives. And I think that's really what makes Sezzle different. We're not just helping someone complete a transaction anymore. We're building a platform that people are actively engaging with because they're getting something really meaningful back from it. And the Motley Fool said it best earlier this year. They said, quote, Sezzle went from a feature to a platform, end quote. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the data. Our shoppers are engaged, loyal, and they're coming back over and over again. But then, of course, the natural question leads to, what does this actually mean for merchants? And one example that really stands out to me is a large sporting and outdoor retailer that we work with. They already had multiple buy now, pay later providers in place. And I think most people would assume that there's not much incremental opportunity left. But Sezzle drove 65% net new customers to that merchant. So in other words, we weren't just shifting transactions around, we were bringing in customers that they really just weren't reaching before. And those customers are spending more. We increased their AOV by 53%. So that's not cannibalization, that's truly real growth.
Yep. net new customers. And to your point, I think oftentimes it get looks at as that, okay, you're losing that transaction in the moment, but you're also not thinking about the potential lifetime value of that customer either. So,
Exactly.
there's that lost revenue opportunity because you're losing them right up front as well.
Right.
Um, I want to talk about another one of your clients. I recently saw your co-marketing campaign with David's Bridal. You ended up actually taking over Times Square together. So, congratulations to the team there. Tell me a little bit about the relationship with David's Bridal and kind of how that partnership is come to light.
Yeah, this has been a real fun and exciting partnership. And I think when you think about weddings, payments probably aren't the first thing that comes to mind. But when the average wedding costs just shy of $40,000, then suddenly that does become part of the conversation, whether you like it or not. So this partnership started with a very real consumer need. And as Kelly Cook, the CEO of David's Bridal, has shared, 75% of their brides say that their biggest challenge is budget, which honestly might be one of the more surprising wedding stats I've heard. I thought for sure it would have been, the mother-in-law or the seating chart or trying to get all your bridesmaids to agree on everything. But when the average wedding costs almost 40K, it's really easy to understand why budget rises to the top of that list. And, that's exactly where Sezzle could add value. So when we launched the partnership, we knew we wanted to do more than just a standard announcement. And the timing was just right with Valentine's Day around the corner. So we really had a perfect opportunity to celebrate love in a way that felt just truly authentic to both brands. And that's what led us to partner with the Times Square Alliance to help bring love in Times Square to life. It turned into a full Times Square celebration of love. We had two real weddings that were officiated by Kelly Cook. We had surprise proposals, hundreds of vow renewals, giveaways, photo moments, and then a ton of just special Sezzle offers for all the people who attended. And what I loved about it was that it took the partnership off a slide deck and it really brought it into the real world. So we weren't just talking about helping people navigate some of life's biggest moments. We were there in Times Square, standing there celebrating these moments right alongside them, which was just so cool. And both Sezzle and David's Bridal are focused on helping people say yes to important life moments with a little bit more confidence and obviously with us, flexibility. So Times Square just happened to be a pretty unforgettable and amazing place to bring that story to life.
Yeah, and to your point, you've gotten to be part of these special and really obviously memorable moment in people's lives when they're getting married. It's such an important and memorable event in their life. So, that brings home that kind of feeling that you're really helping these consumers too, right? So that they're able to enjoy these kind of fun life moments. I alluded to the fact that Sezzle is now celebrating its 10th year in 2026. Let's talk a little bit about those 10 years. And you've been there for nearly all of it, as one of the early employees at Sezzle. So looking back, tell me what you believe has been kind of the keys to the success that Sezzle has achieved during these last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people see a 10-year-old company and assume that the story was inevitable, but it wasn't. I mean, there were a lot of moments where this company could have gone in a different direction. And I think when I reflect on my 8 years plus here at Sezzle, the two words that immediately come to my mind are, it may sound cheesy, but it's just truly how I feel is heart and perseverance. I know firsthand because I did it, that building a company from scratch is really hard. And there's growing pains, there's going to be pivots and setbacks, moments that absolutely test you. But what carried Sezzle through those moments were the people and the people that just refused to quit. I have to give special credit to Charlie, our CEO, our founder, and then Paul, who is our president and co-founder, Amin, our now CEO, and Karen, who is our recently retired CFO. Those four, I mean, they really helped lead this company through the challenges that would, I mean, quite frankly, broken a lot of organizations. And behind them are countless Sezzlers who stayed committed to the mission. I think when it would have been a lot easier to just walk away. And that's what this company is built on. It's not luck, it's not timing. It's really just built on character, resilience, and a group of people who never stopped believing in what we're building. And then the second thing that I attribute our success to is that we never stopped evolving. We were first to market in the US with BNPL, which sounds great in hindsight. But at the time it was really hard. I mean, I remember when I was selling, it meant walking into sales meetings and spending half the conversation and meeting just explaining what buy now, pay later even was. I mean, retailers were looking at us like we had two heads. And then fast forward to today, and the conversation couldn't be more different. BNPL has really become a standard expected payment option. And we're no longer explaining what it is, but we're talking about what provider makes the most sense, how many providers should you have. So to put things into perspective, the global BNPL market is projected to reach more than $500 billion this year in 2026. And it's incredibly rewarding to know that Sezzle has helped build that category from the ground up. And then the last thing, and honestly, I think the part that gets me the most excited is just seeing the proof that our product evolution is really, truly working. Total transactions grew 36% year over year in our most recent quarter. But what excites me even more than that is just the customer experience and what that says about our customers. They're coming back more often than ever than before. 2 years ago, the average shopper used Sezzle fewer than 5 times a quarter. Today, it's more than 7 times. And that's a record high in company history. So people aren't just using or trying Sezzle anymore time to time. They're choosing it again and again. It's really becoming a preferred way to pay. And Charlie, our CEO, said it best. He said, if our progress surprised you, stay tuned. We're just getting started. And personally, I don't want to miss what comes next because it's been so exciting from the beginning till now.
Yeah, so that actually is a good segue into as we kind of wrap up our conversation, Traci. For those in our audience of retailers, if they're going to remember one thing about Sezzle, what would that be? What would you want that to be?
Yeah, I think that I would want retailers to stop thinking about BNPL as a payment method. It's too small. So the best BNPL providers today, they aren't competing for share of checkout. They're really competing for customer attention long before checkout ever happens. So if I'm a retailer, I'm already spending millions of dollars every year trying to find new customers, and we bring them. Low acquisition cost, incremental revenue, and a shopper base that you otherwise wouldn't reach. That's what Sezzle is. So end of the day, one takeaway, we're not just another payment button. We're a customer acquisition engine that just happens to live at checkout.
And to your point, customer acquisition costs continuing to rise. Finding profitable customers in the funnel is critical, and Sezzle's helping to deliver that for its retail clients.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to take the opportunity to thank Traci Bower. Traci, again, is the Senior Vice President of Revenue at Sezzle, for joining us on this episode of Total Retail Tech Insights. Thank you, Traci.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Tech Insights is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Tech Insights.